Resident Evil Village DLC trailer teases unspeakable horrors for Rose. Resident Evil Village's new DLC, Winter's Expansion, will end the Winters family saga, according to Capcom. Capcom director Kento Kinoshita told IGN at Tokyo Game Show that the Shadows of Rose portion of the DLC will wrap up the family's story. Capcom producer Masachika Kawata declined to comment to IGN about what that future holds, saying Capcom could absolutely not talk about the next step for the franchise. Shadows of Rose, one part of the Village DLC coming October 28, is set 16 years after the events of Village, when Rose Winters learns about herself and her strange powers. Ethan Winters, Rose's father, first appeared in the Resident Evil franchise in 2017's Resident Evil 7, Biohazard before returning for Village. His wife and Rose's mother, Mia, appeared in both games, too. The upcoming Resident Evil Village DLC Shadows of Rose will introduce horrifying new enemies for Rose Winters to face on her survival experience. A new trailer for the Resident Evil Village expansion, Shadows of Rose, teases brand new and terrifying foes for players to face. The upcoming DLC will take place 19 years after the events of the main game, with Ethan Winters' daughter Rose serving as the protagonist. Capcom has teased that the difficulty in Resident Evil Village, Shadows of Rose will be higher than the base game, and new horrific monsters will no doubt play a role in creating that difficulty. Judging from the final cutscene of Resident Evil 8, fans have speculated that Ethan Winters may return. The expansion for Resident Evil 8 releases on October 28, and the community may receive those answers as well as the potential direction that the franchise will head in next, seeing as how the DLC picks up right from where the ending of Resident Evil 8 leaves off. Resident Evil Village put a more action-oriented spin on the first-person gameplay introduced in RE7, and now Shadows of Rose will make additional changes to the formula. The entire expansion will be played from a third-person perspective, making the DLC feel similar to the modern remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3. Rose Winters' supernatural powers will also play an essential role in both the story and gameplay, complementing the typical arsenal of Resident Evil weapons. Shadows of Rose is set to make various changes to Resident Evil Village gameplay, and new creatures will help keep players on their toes. A new trailer for Shadows of Rose, posted to Twitter by Resident Evil, hints at some horrifying new monsters coming in the expansion. The trailer outlines the Winters family saga, with Ethan venturing to save his daughter 19 years before she embarks on her own adventure. A clip sees Rose use her supernatural powers to fend off a monster, and then another grotesque foe is seen shambling past her. This grotesque creature has a shackle clamped around one leg, and it carries a massive rusty mace as a weapon. With the Resident Evil Village DLC set to be even more difficult than the base game, this mysterious menace will no doubt be completely terrifying when players encounter it in Shadows of Rose. Resident Evil Village, Shadows of Rose will have some horrific creatures. While Resident Evil Village stars Rose and Ethan Winters throughout the base game and DLC, Shadows of Rose will apparently serve as a conclusion to the family's story. The Winters were first introduced in Resident Evil 7, with Ethan fighting to find and save his wife Mia from the Baker family. Village then saw the hero journey to save their daughter Rose, who had been kidnapped and taken to a bizarre European village. With Shadows of Rose concluding this saga, it remains unclear who Resident Evil 9 will focus on instead. Resident Evil Village managed to deliver an intense first-person experience, and now Shadows of Rose is set to bring the horror to an entirely new perspective. The expansion will give Rose Winters powerful abilities, but terrifying new enemies will put her survival skills to the ultimate test. Set for release on October 28, the Shadows of Rose DLC will add even more evil to Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village, Winters expansion file size revealed. The Winters expansion file size of Resident Evil Village has been revealed. Players will now know what to expect when downloading the Resident Evil 8 expansion, which will allow them to better prepare for it in case their used-up space exceeds the maximum capacity. There have been several theories regarding the fate of Ethan Winters, but fans may not have to wait much longer. PlayStation Game Size posted on Twitter the file size of Resident Evil 8's expansion, which is reported to be 6.997 GBs on the PS5. This file size is suspected to be the same on other platforms as well. Some feedback reveals trepidation over the size not reflecting the amount of content that fans were hoping for, although given the nature of Resident Evil's linear-driven experience, a lot of content can be packed into around 7 GB. Based on what has been shown so far, the Resident Evil 8 DLC is packed with content, which includes the Shadow of Rose story expansion and a brand new third-person mode, similar to the Resident Evil 2 remake. Shadow of Rose has the daughter of Ethan Winter returning to the village, with new powers that should add a refreshing element to the gameplay, while possibly setting up what players can expect in Resident Evil 9. The third-person mode will allow classic Resident Evil fans to experience the game in a way that they may prefer. So, now players will have the preference between third and first person, which should bridge the gap in the fanbase that was somewhat divided when Capcom decided to deviate from the third-person perspective starting with Resident Evil 7. The end of October is sure to be a treat for Resident Evil fans, as Capcom released a teaser for its Resident Evil showcase taking place later in the month. This showcase will include further information on Resident Evil Village, Gold Edition, the expansion itself, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and maybe some reveals of things to come in the future. Until then, players can get their consoles and PCs ready for the exciting expansion that is to come.